No questions?
No, yesterday.
Material personal interest, conflict of interest gifts, nothing to declare from anyone? No, all good. Petitions to being tabled?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we'll move on to our one and only item, page 21. And then go to below.
That's correct.
Okay. I'd like to present to you today the new draft enterprise risk management framework. So the governance team has undertaken a review of the existing risk management framework and incorporated a number of changes. The changes themselves were based on feedback received from the SMEC group. The SMEC group were engaged to review the integrated construction management system manual on behalf of infrastructure and utilities. And from that review, a gap analysis report was produced and provided to council. The governance team then went forward to incorporate a number of those recommendations from the analysis report. One of the major changes which was incorporated was to change the risk framework from a qualitative system to a quantitative system, so that we can more accurately measure and manage our risk. In addition to that, there are a number of other enhancements which have been included. The major one of those was actually establishing the line of sight between our corporate and operational planning and project work. We have also changed a number of the effectiveness ratings so that we can provide quantification around those. And have also included further procedural steps for the management of risk that will be used by council officers. In the review, a number of key priorities were observed, and that was to ensure that decision making in the organisation has now become visible, and that risk tolerance is within council's appetite. And that retained risk aligns with the achievement of our strategic objectives. Analysis of treatment of risk is enhanced. Risk management is supported and embedded in line management, and that council will be able to own and manage their risk going forward. So that's the main changes that have occurred. The upcoming works that will need to be undertaken will involve the governance team meeting with departments and work units across council. And the reason for those meetings is to identify the organisation positioning of risk management within the foundations of departmental works, and with a view to operationalising the risk. So what that means is that we'll be looking at where projects commence for each of the departments so that we can embed the framework within the day-to-day operations to ensure that risk management becomes a priority in establishing those projects. It will also involve liaison with, I know Jason Bradshaw is working on the project decisions framework, so we'll be looking at a line of sight between the two documents to ensure that they're compatible and that one enhances the other. Once we've finished with those meetings, we'll be then looking at what procedures that we'll put in place to actually embed the framework within those works. And there is further work, some of which has already been conducted in developing tools for use by council officers, in which those tools are used to actually measure and manage the risk, and therefore we get consistent reporting on risk against council works and council projects. As I mentioned at this stage, this is only the very initial draft of the new framework. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
So through the chair, Lila, the matrix that we create, that'll be the manifestation of this framework in action when it looks at it, and that'll be the key to it all.
That's correct.
But this is the important scene setting.
This is the scene setting. We felt that we couldn't go and do our consultation and communication with departments without having something to take to them first. because it was a bit open-ended then. So now we have a document that we can build upon and modify to ensure that it meets the needs of the departments and the council officers, you know, so that they can accurately and comprehensively report and manage those risks. So what council then can expect to see going forward is that with each of the projects that have put forward, and also for general managers and executive managers, is when those major projects are coming up and council works are coming up, you would expect to see the tools that we deliver so that you are then measuring apples with apples as we go forward. It'll all be very clearly set out. The tool itself that's being designed is being done in such a way that it requires minimal work. So we're not looking at maximising work, we're just looking at more efficient practices that actually give us an outcome that we can understand and measure accurately.
Again, through the chair, sorry, Councillor.
You go.
Through the chair, I wondered whether or not if I could request upon either yourself or Mary to explain the goal around trying to integrate risk throughout the organisation, from the operational risks or section risks or activity-based risks right up to the strategic risks. Would it be okay to ask you to do that?
Yes, so we're looking going forward, obviously this will have a great impact on our strategic risk register. So once we have a framework established, we'll be working with each of the departments then to look to develop the operational risk registers based on this framework. And those operational risks will of course then feed into our strategic risk register. We'll also be looking at our operational planning as well to look at what risks the operational plan itself holds that may then feed into those risk registers. Sorry, and one other area I did fail to mention was the fraud risk. This framework then has potential to create further impact on that, so we may need to go back to that fraud risk framework as well and do further review on that. The main change being that quantitative approach instead of the qualitative. So it will be a major body of work for the governance team going forward. It's not just a review of the framework itself. It's also our intent to perhaps have LGM assets or JLT come up to actually talk to our general and executive managers and perhaps even at management level on the implementation of the framework to assist them in understanding how to identify our risks and manage and measure the risks so that we have a holistic approach across council going forward.
No, that's good.
Yeah, that was probably through the chair, that was probably the question that I was asking, because I was saying, like when you were speaking there, it sounded as though it was for projects only, and I think you covered that it's for the whole of the environment. Just, is that a risk putting there that we listen, we are clear, instead of we seek to be? Is that a risk in itself? Because like if we don't do one of those things, are we seen to be falling down? Like we've just got, we treat others as we wish to be treated, we are fair, should we strive to be? Or?
I think if I can, through the chair, and these values, and this is what council has committed to revisiting early next year,
Yeah.
They're a positive affirmation.
Yeah.
But I think the headline comment is on page 3 or page 27. Council has established a set of values which are implicit in our work practices, including risk management, and guide us in servicing our community. We could have language there that says we will try or we will strive in all those cases, but I think it's generally been done to be as positive an affirmation as possible. And it's implied that we strive to do all those things.
Yeah, I know it's the norm, but
Yeah.
it's just if you fall down on any of those things, is that seen as a risk anyway? Like in this risk document?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why all of these things are written, that we do this and we do that, but lots of times we don't actually get to that 100% in those things.
I think that the other thing through the chair is that it's common that in an organisation, particularly large organisations like ours, there is always going to be a gap between the stated values and what is the reality. And then the culture, I suppose, is a reflection of the stage at which the organisation is at. And there should always be a drive to try and close that gap and espouse the values, the stated values. If the stated values become just that little bit loose, then there may not be the focus on striving or stretching to try and live those values that there needs to be.
So, Gail, it could be around, through the chair, we strive to, or our goal is to.
That's what I would like to see.
Our goal is to.
Yeah, I just think if those words are in there, this is our ultimate aim.
Yeah.
But, you know, if we don't reach it or we get complaints about something, this is what we strive to do. But if we don't get it, it's not really our fault. These things happen, and I know Lila's got it in there later on where accidents do happen and things do happen, and we know they do. But it's just, that's your values sitting out in front of this document. And, you know, if you fall down 90% instead of 100%, I just think that it is our aim.
It could be something simple as to the best of our ability.
Yeah, no,
That covers everyone there.
Just some wording.
through you, Mr. Chairman, I think council will have a good go at this early next year, and I think that'll be the chance. There's 6 values there, and I know that there's an appetite to reduce those down to a core set that will become more focused. And I think the language that you strike in describing those values, you'll be able to get it right then.
Yeah, I think that'll be less wordy than what we've got now and more succinct.
Yeah. So the other thing is that these values are reflected through the organisation in different forms, and sometimes you just see the headings: continuous improvement, respect for all, and so on. Those dot points that live underneath them are extra detail to help guide the thinking of employees around how to espouse those values. So they don't appear on everything we produce. It's mainly the 6 headline values. But no, that's a good point.
So, through the chair, and just as a part of the discussion of whether Law American answers, I mean, how does this, I mean, obviously notwithstanding the contents of the consultant, obviously it's identical. This is, I mean, how does this compare to what we have now?
Okay, I'm happy to lead you through some of the major changes. So a lot of the text within it is existing. We have included on page 9 the line of sight document, so that it clearly demonstrates what Scott was talking about before with the strategic and operational risks. And you can see from the integrated planning framework where how the risks are managed and where they feed through to till they end up in the corporate risk register or the departmental risks. We have on the next page, page 11, we have included the diagram which shows the embedding of the risk management culture. Previously, that only went from the council down to, I believe it was the executive level. So we've actually gone all the way through the organisation now to show that a risk owner can be at any level and embedded within all areas of the organisation. The other area is, so all of the tables for the measurement of risk have been changed to quantitative. Now I've only gone halfway with that at this time, so it's a big step to go from qualitative to quantitative. So you'll see whilst the numerical measures are there, we still have the qualitative headings to assist in transition. So it would be our intent going forward that those qualitative measures will drop off altogether once we embed these practices within the organisation. The responsibility levels on page 19 and the risk acceptability levels have now been clearly defined based on that quantitative approach, and we have established that a risk severity of 8. So we didn't actually have a level after which risk was unacceptable before. So based on advice from the SMEC group, that is now 8. So anything above 8 will require full completion of the tool that we're going to bring forward to clearly outline how we'll be working on that. On page 20, addressing risks, we didn't necessarily have clear guidelines on how to assess the risk or the effectiveness of the risk. So some of the new risk registers that you will have seen coming forward have an area for them to continually assess that risk going forward, assess the control measures going forward to determine whether they're still effective or whether further control measures need to be applied. So whilst we may apply a control measure to assess that risk, it doesn't mean that from here and ever after that will continue to be effective. So in reviewing that, we need to determine on a regular basis. The risk acceptability, so we have more clearly defined what that acceptability is and that's on page 22, and what activities need to occur to accept that risk. The whole area on page 24, the table there for risk register review process has been included, so that was not previously included. And I'll backtrack to page 23, the risk register establishment and review that goes with it. So as I mentioned, we will be looking at developing operational risk registers for the departments, and those departments will become the owners of those registers. So we need to provide for them clear guidelines on the establishment of the register and the management of the register going forward. So whilst we know, because we look after the fraud risk and the strategic risk, we didn't expect that everybody would necessarily know how to manage that going forward, so that's very clearly identified. There's also a section which has been included on risk treatment plans. So those plans are actually incorporated in the tool that we will be releasing. So rather than just referring to a control measure that's been implemented, they'll actually need to write a treatment plan, which will outline what the control measure is, who's responsible, when it needs to be implemented by, and what review process will actually apply to that risk treatment. Most of the section on page 25 on major projects and tenders and risk assessment activities, and the information on insurance is all new. We hadn't specifically outlined insurance as being a control measure for risk, but it is one of the major control measures that council actually have in treating their risk, is that we have insurance against a number of activities which may occur. And then that's the completion of all of the new areas that are actually in the framework. So I think we've actually broken it down into a real step-by-step process that council officers can follow from commencement of their project right through to the end, which is to the register and beyond, which means the monitoring of those risks going forward.
So through the chair, can I just take you back to that risk acceptability?
Page 19, yeah.
Just the risk acceptability kind of doesn't really sound all that great, that you're accepting any form of risk, but it's just wording. I mean, you've got ideally treat with routine or specific procedures. It'd be better to just put and treat, wouldn't it, or just not ideally, just...
Which level is this one at?
This is 4 to 8 and 1 to 3. It just says ideally treat, but I think it needs to be more positive than that.
Sorry.
You can just take out ideally and just put treat with routine procedures.
That's fine. I can make that change.
Don't you think? It's just the wording and risk acceptability. Do we accept any form of risk?
Yes, we do, we need to.
So do we put a different word in there?
The thing with risk is, through the chair, that local government is typically risk averse, but through the Australian Institute of Company Directors training that was conducted, we identified that there is a need to set what your risk tolerance is, or your risk appetite is, and that starts on page 13. But there is a need for council to take some risks when it makes decisions, but it should do those within the threshold of the appetite or the tolerance that it's identified for itself as a local government. So not all risks can be ameliorated.
No,
They
I
need to be
realise that.
understood.
But it just looks funny that we've got an acceptability
You need to accept some risk.
risk. Yeah, I just got a different wording there. I don't know what other word you'd use, but
Probably challenges the philosophy behind it. I understand what you're saying around the language of it, but in practice, if we were going to make a decision, we would look at all the risks of making the decision. And if, for example, there was no risk to our service delivery, but there was a potential risk to our reputation or the political environment, you might still go ahead and make that decision, but you're making that decision in the knowledge that it could do some reputational risk damage to the organisation. So in that case, you are not able to stave off the risk, you're accepting that risk.
yeah.
Maybe Lila or Mary can help me out here, but I think that's the idea of it, is that we live in a world of risk and we have to take on or accept a level or degree of risk.
And I mean, that is shown there in that, you know, the 13 to 25 and in that side of it. It's just the heading that kind of,
Through the chair, I think it just to maybe add someone to as well, Councillor Nixon, a lot of the definitions associated with risk and the talk around risk comes from the ISO standard. So while I suppose looking at it individually, it might appear like wording that is probably not safe to use, but it is words that are acknowledged and recognised through risk
recognised,
management. Yeah, so it is a word that is used everywhere. I think to look at substituting clearly defined words from a standard of that level would probably cause confusion here and would make it more questionable. So that the authenticity to the standard and what we use here, that we are applying the same terminology and process from the ISO standard.
yeah, I mean, you've got that set out there, the levels of severity, but yeah, it's just.
I guess it's the wording that's used across industry.
Yeah.
If we change that.
Yeah,
I understand what Mary's saying, and I understand what you're saying about using that word.
yeah, just when I was reading it
That's-
through the other day, I thought, gosh, you know, it just looks like you're accepting risks.
So through the chair, what I would suggest that we do is I'll go back to the standard and see if it is a definition in the standard, then we'll stay with that, but if it's not, I could possibly look at something else.
So, yeah, thank you.
So perhaps council, through the chair, if you have a look at page 13, under the section risk appetite, the fourth paragraph, the last paragraph on the page, encapsulates things reasonably well. Therefore, our risk appetite is necessarily towards the middle of the risk-taking spectrum to ensure opportunities are maximised by effectively managing risks. As a dynamic organisation, we may choose to increase or decrease our appetite for higher risk activities depending on the viability of our position. A classic example is we make debenture investments regularly. We tend to stick to big banks. Would we as a mainstream council invest on the stock market, or would we take on a more risky investment in order to get a greater return? Probably not. But there might be some middle ground between those two examples where we might choose to invest some money for a higher return, balancing out that risk. The finances are an easy one. The more difficult ones are related to decisions that we make at each of our meetings. And with that introduction and through the chair, if I could ask a question to Lila and Mary. We have, I'll just hold it up so you can see it. We've recently upgraded the risk section of our decision-making reports, and that's supposed to show the green shaded area is where our risk appetite lies. So we're saying that if the assessment of making that proposed decision lies within that green area, then council should not concern itself with any risk considerations. If it's outside of that threshold in the greyer area, then there needs to be some sort of an assessment or judgment or information provided to help council make its decision. But the question I wanted to ask is, we're using these 5 broad categories of health and safety risks, service delivery risks, financial risks, community risks, and environmental risks. And then if you flip to page 14, under risk appetite, we've got some other categories there. And the question is, do you think that the 5 that we're using is adequate, or should we be looking at maybe some different titles to take in some of the other risks identified in that table?
So you're saying, let's shrink this one down or spread the other?
I don't want to create work, but I just want to make sure that with those 5 capture most of the concerns around making decisions.
So the table that is on page 14 is more about our appetite for those areas. So I think in benchmarking across other councils, which I did undertake in development of the framework, I also benchmarked against industry as well. The categories, the 5 that we actually have seem to be the most common, that everybody seems to measure their risk on. The appetite that's here is more about expressing that in those areas, and they may fall into any one of those 5, this is exactly what our appetite is. So we can have this information and still stay with the 5. Yep. But I do know, just from a personal perspective in measuring the risk against these 5, there are sometimes risks, other risks which don't fall within these 5. So in some ways, and especially when you look at big projects, to define them just to those 5 can be very difficult. I don't know that council are perhaps getting a clear picture of what our risk is when we constrict ourselves to those. So really that's a decision for the organisation as a whole to determine which way we actually go.
Was your question more, sorry, Scott, was your question more that we review the 5 we have selected for the decision making and confirm that those 5 are correct, or expand them to the 8 and then you can choose which apply for the decision making report?
I think the background behind the question through the chair is those 5, that's the template we're using for the decision reports. And I probably worry about the complacency of the report writer in wanting to make sure that the risk profile fits into the threshold, therefore you don't have to do the extra work in describing why it's outside the threshold. And then as Lila points out, if we had an adaptability to be able to say, while everything's okay with these 5 risks, there are some other concerns, and that might just be a qualitative assessment underneath or something, just so that it would be, in an ideal world, it would be great for our councillor to go to a report section, the risk section, read that and be 100% confident that we've got no exposures if we make this decision, or that if we do, they've been correctly analysed. And while we've changed to a modern and a more engaging format with the graphical, I think in doing that we've also allowed just that degree of complacency to occur, particularly if you've got multiple deadlines and you've got to write a number of reports. And because the last probably 2 months, I approve all the items that go in the agendas, and there hasn't been a lot of discussion around risk. And the older format, it forced you to at least write something about risk, whereas this format's a lot easier and cleaner. But it just means that we may not be getting the full picture. So while I'm confident we've progressed to a better way, it might just need tweaking to make sure that we present the real picture to the decision makers.
I agree with you there. The measurement of risk is a person's perception, and it's individual to that person and their involvement in the project. So whilst in this one it's been indicated at a certain level, there's no commentary around how they arrived at that decision. One of the examples that's here in the risk appetite table is legal and regulatory compliance. Now, our work at the moment on that compliance framework is a huge body of work that is intended to give assurance to council that we are compliant, and that's not one of the areas that's actually in our risk in the 5 categories here. So if I was putting up a report to council that, and our risk lie in that area, where would I indicate it in the 5? Infrastructure and assets, yes, there's a financial assessment that's currently done, But if I wanted to indicate to you that there is potential here for loss in that area, I really probably just need to document it, and the same as Scott, I have concerns as whether people are going to that extent to indicate that.
Yeah, because every dot I've seen is in the threshold or right on the edge, and it's not enough to warrant a comment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we should, as a committee, it might be an action to pursue as a committee to have that looked at.
And through the chair, once we determine what the content of our framework is, I would like to see that section in the report updated as well to reflect the new quantitative measures that are actually in the framework as well, so that we're always looking at the same measurements.
That sounds good. Yeah.
Through the chair, we actually don't spend a lot of time on looking at the little structure on top of it, everything anyway, do we? We don't actually recognise that it's there or talk about it much.
No, you are right, and through the chair, we should talk about it a whole lot more, and that's why it was an honest assessment. Then you can say, well, look, I can see what the office has written there, and they have thought of a strategy around managing that risk, and I'm happy with that, and therefore I support the decision.
And we haven't.
Risk should be a focus on the decision making.
We haven't even sat down and had an explanation of it, really. No. So.
Well, in defence of the team, through the chair, it's been a long time coming. It actually, the need to change the way we reported on risk arose out of the AICDC course that was conducted in January 2015, I think it was, with the previous council. And it had taken a long time, and then with the evolution of our agenda management and minute taking software, it's been very difficult to incorporate a graphic into it because it's all text-based. So we've had a lot of challenges in getting it to the stage where it's at now, and in changing just flagging here today that there's probably a few shortcuts there that could be taken unless we tweak the system a little bit more. So we do need to do that, and of course work through it, talk about it, not train anyone, but just make them aware of how it works so that they're familiar with it.
Yeah, I was aware of what it means, because it just, you kind of work out where the red dot's supposed to be sometimes.
Yeah, they're all good comments. But it's good that we're talking about it, and it's good that we've got a draft framework here today, and the heavy lifting will come in the formulation of the matrix. And then the application of that will inform things like changes to the agenda templates. But we're certainly on the right track with it.
And that matrix that's over there, with the colours, I forget which page, but that's a common matrix, isn't it? Yeah,
the matrix I refer to, Councillor, is that one where we actually identify all of the headline strategic risks, right down through the organisation, and talk about what the exposure is now, what the interventions, actions are that ameliorate the risk, and then what the, I don't know what the language for it is, what the residual risk rating is after those things are done, and then there's other layers to it as well. I'm out of my depth here now, but that's that real work, and that'll be a messy, not a messy, but it'll be a big A3 matrix of some sort to get the content into it. That's the heavy lifting. And we do have that in place already, but this is about breathing reality into it.
We have to.
Yeah.
Some of that might fall into place better once we start going through, start with our values, and then working at getting that discussion out as to where that leads into acceptable risk.
You're right, Mr. Chairman, it will have an impact. I still I believe that there's merit in at least supporting or adopting in principle the framework, because that allows the body of work to continue. When council does create its new vision, mission and values and strategic intent, there's a requirement for that to go on public notification, and that's typically around about 30 days. And then you would take into account submissions that you receive, and then you may put that out to the public. The point I'm trying to make is that there could be a 2 to 3 month lag in finalising the body of work that council's about to embark on early next year, and I wouldn't like to see progress halted on things like this I believe that when the vision, mission, and values are created, we can go back and amend this document, and there could be implications for what that risk matrix looks like based on the changed strategic intent or the changed values, that it shouldn't be significant.
Through the chair, could I just ask a question just on clarity on page 22, or just of the, sorry, back to the report in the first part of the agenda item. It says, after these it does not address risk content as a starting point of the risk. What does that mean? Is it?
The risk context is actually on page 16 of the framework.
Yeah. Right, that was the context.
So they're the impacts to our risks that we need to consider in assessing the risks, so agricultural, social, political, legal, etc. Key drivers and trends having an impact on the objectives of council. I would actually like to workshop perhaps with the executive leadership team some more information around the context, so we can actually look at areas such as tourism, industry, etc. that affect how we manage our risk as well. So we need to take it, bring it into context, if you know what I mean. So, and that information actually, although they said it was not there, a lot of that context was there, probably just wasn't as clear in the previous version.
Just, you've got through the chair, you've got the councillors at the top there. That risk is covered by insurances for us to are insured against, and to what degree, and if we're making the decisions, like say we make a decision to buy a motel and it fails, but it's a risk we take because the big influx of people coming to town. I mean, what coverage have we got?
Again, through the chair, the insurance through the LGM allows for councillors and officers insurance, and I guess the basis of that is that all decisions and reports that is presented to council is based on your the officers' professional background, their training and their research into the report, so that everything presented is, all your decisions are based on, I suppose, the ethics behind that and the goodwill and the training. So that covers the aspect of that risk in decision making, that your decisions are made on the best interests for the community based on experts within the council that provide those decisions to you.
And so someone in the staff has advised us to do that. Is their responsibility to pass on to us, or our responsibility to pass back to them? Is there any personal liability on anyone?
No.
Because that's something that was of concern a few years ago, wasn't it?
I'm not too sure what you refer to, councillor.
Yeah, it was, probably, might be 15 years ago. There was a thing there that councillors, I know a lot of councillors put all their assets to the side because they could be personally liable.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm just getting it clarified that that's not there anymore.
Just through the chair, there's protections available for council and for officers of council. So should a recommendation from an officer turn out to be negligent, but not grossly negligent, but not including full information, there's a protection there for the officer. There's also protections there for councillors and the council. That said, if a council was to willingly make a decision that was contradicting law or something that was grossly negligent, there wouldn't be those protections. But it's there for ordinary decision making where it's done in the right frame of mind, the best intent, And if it turns out that there wasn't full information and there's ramifications from that decision, there's protections available. That's the key. There's a couple of policies, and I can't remember the names of them.
In fact, councillors and officers probably know the policy, but in terms of public liability suspension, because that's what it would come down to, that the public could pursue you for that. And it's, Marianne just got a copy of the wording recently from me, so it's something I can email through to the CEO for circulation if you
We should send that around to councillors. That's a good idea, Mary.
Yeah.
Is that something that will get looked at in this framework? Like at the moment, we're looking to set the framework. Is that right?
Yep.
And then those things will come from further discussions. And I'm sure there'll be other things, but that's not, we're here to make sure that the framework is what we want.
That's right. The framework is the starting point,
Yeah.
and the detail will come later, particularly in the form of the matrix, in identifying the risks and what's in place to ameliorate or reduce the risks.
Yeah.
And depending on what the risk is, there could be any number of things. So that's the heavy lifting I refer to. This is the scene setting document, making sure that this committee is comfortable with the intent of the framework. That's the first point. And it's only been presented as an information report for discussion and workshopping. And beyond that, we should be proposing it for adoption. Yeah. So today's about getting feedback, answering questions, tweaking anything here that you may be uncomfortable with, and then from there we adopt this document and then start to build the matrix.
It's an opportunity to have a close look.
Have we got any other questions around the structure of the framework? I'm happy with that. So we adopt that.
In principle.
You could if you wanted to, if you felt comfortable you could, or you can just receive the report and we can bring it back with draft taken off it and any adjustments that need to be made. But I think adopting it in principle means that we can get on with it and start to develop it further. It's not set in stone, it still needs to be brought back to be adopted proper, but it means we've got a base that we can go away and start working on.
So if we do that, do we want it to come back to all of us? For the other guys to have a look at as well, being such a large document?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that this is the type of business that this standing committee needs to concern itself with, and I would be recommending that the committee is in doing the right thing by adopting it in principle, and then we could reserve the right for the full council to adopt it finally.
And through the chair, it'll end up in the audit committee as well, so.
That's right, it'll be scrutinised at that level.
Okay.
Is everyone happy to adopt that?
I'll move it be adopted.
Move councillor Winston, second that, councillor Brimbleko. All those in favour? Unanimous.
Didn't try to prolong it.
No, that's right. But the adopted this council adopted enterprise risk management framework.
Thank you, Laura. Mary, thank you. Do we have any general business? Yeah.
I just try and ask enough questions to keep it going out.
That's all right, we did well, I mean, it's all relevant.
You just got to wait 2 o'clock, that's the worst part.
We'll come back. Yeah.
No, Mr. Chairman, no.
What have you got? Meeting action. Yeah, we did that. You want to make something up? No. We didn't meet yesterday's meeting. But that's, no one's got general business.
Not a race,
Sorry?
not a race.
Close the meeting at 10:10.
Before you do, I'd just like to thank you for chairing it for this year, for this term, and thanks very much for the leadership, and wish everybody here a Merry Christmas.
Thank you. That's all right, and we